Welcome to Chapter 4, Posting Journal Entries to General Ledger Accounts. The essential outcomes for Chapter 4. You will be able to post business entries from the General Journal to the General Ledger by A. Identifying accounting concepts and practices related to posting from a general journal to a general ledger. B. Preparing a chart of accounts for a service proprietorship. C. Posting from a general journal to a general ledger. D. Proving cash. E. Connecting key terms in the chapter with application. We are going to start first with a Chapter 3 review. In Chapter 3, we learned how to record transactions into the General Journal. We know that when we add a transaction, we always list the debit first. The debit is put up against the left wall of the account title section. When we list our credit, we will indent it at least 5 spaces. Remember, a journal is a permanent record where each transaction is recorded in chronological order. However, the problem with the general journal is that it does not show in one place the changes in a single account. For example, we want to find the cash account balance. In order to do this, we would have to go through all the debit and credit transactions in the general journal to calculate the final balance in the cash account. Then we'd have to go through and do this for each account. This is time consuming. The accounting cycle. In Chapter 2, you learned how to identify and analyze source documents. Chapter 3, you learned the second step of the accounting cycle, which was recording transactions into the general journal. Step 3, you now will be learning how to post the general journal transactions into the general ledger. Please make sure you put these to memory, since you will need to know these 3 steps for the test. So, in Chapter 4, we are going to learn how to post from the general journal to the general ledger in order to determine our account balances for each account. To start Chapter 4, we are going to look at 4-1 accounting terminology. Ledger. A ledger is a group of accounts. The general ledger is a ledger that contains all accounts needed to prepare the financial statements. Account number. The account number is the number assigned to an individual account. File maintenance. File maintenance is the procedure for arranging accounts in a general ledger, assigning account numbers, and keeping records current. Opening an account. When we open an account, we write an account title and an account number on the heading of the general ledger account. When we worked with T accounts, we had a debit side and a credit side. We know that on that T account, there is a side that is an increase side and a decrease side. The increase and decrease side are determined by the accounting equation. So when we match up our T account to our general ledger form, we are going to see that we have information that will trace an entry back to a journal page. So we have the account and the account number. And then if you look at the T account, the debit side matches up to the debit column in the ledger. The credit side matches up to the credit side of the ledger. So the first debit and credit columns are for transactions that are posted from the general journal to the general ledger. The last two columns are for the account balance. An account will have either a debit balance or a credit balance. It cannot have both. So there'll always be one side of the balance column that is not used. The balance side is determined by where the account falls in the accounting equation. Chart of accounts. Every business has their own unique set of accounts. This is determined by the size of the business and the type of the business. So how do we set up account numbers? Every account is given a number. The first number is general ledger division. In other words, it represents whether or not that account is an asset, a liability, capital, drawing, revenue, or expense. The second two numbers are the location of that account within the general ledger division. Looking at general ledger division numbers, assets always start with number 1. Liabilities always start with 2. Capital and drawing will start with 3. Revenue will start with 4. And expenses will start with 5. So we are preparing a chart of account. So let's look at some examples. We know that assets start with number 1. We know that assets have a normal debit balance. This is determined by where it falls in the accounting equation. So the cash account will have the number 110. The number 1 represents the asset, and 10 represent where it falls in the order of the assets. Liabilities start with 2. We know it has a credit normal balance. Looking at an example account title, accounts payable, the account number is 210. 2 represents liabilities. 10 represents where it falls within the liability section. So as you go through and look at this chart of accounts, you're going to see that each account is given a general ledger division account, and then it's followed by an account that tells you where it falls within the general ledger. So cash 110, the 100 represents the ledger division, 10 represents the location within the ledger division. Adding new accounts to the chart of accounts. Expense accounts are assigned in alphabetical order. Let's say we want to add an account called credit card fee expense within our chart of accounts. Looking at our chart of accounts, we see that credit card fee expense would fall between advertising expense and insurance expense. So we will give it the account title, credit card fee expense, and the account number 515. Opening up a general ledger account. The first step is to write the account title after the word account in the heading. Secondly, we will record the account number. The accounting cycle. In Chapter 2, you learned how to identify and analyze source documents. Chapter 3, you learned the second step of the accounting cycle, which was recording transactions into the general journal. Step 3, you now will be learning how to post the general journal transactions into the general ledger. Please make sure you put these to memory, since you will need to know these 3 steps for the test.
You have just completed 4-1. Please open your accounting book to page 95. You will need working paper page 57. Please complete the assignment. If you need assistance, please let me know. You have just completed section 4-1. When you have shown me your work, please continue on with section 4-2.